morning. We're really excited to be here today. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you. We are the University of Denver team. My name is Hezekiah, and these are my teammates, Caroline, Andy, and Tim. Today we'll be giving a whole recommendation on SM Energy, an oil and gas company, with a target price of $20. Now, before getting into the meat of this research, every time I thought or heard about oil and gas, this is the picture I had in my head. It's all very dramatic, really, and that's definitely a noisy dramatic effect. But what I found is that what these companies do is very complicated and also very interesting. This is what the inside of a well looks like. And SM Energy is an unconventional E&P pure player. And what this means is that they don't only drill vertically, but also horizontally to get the oil from tight shale. Now, SM Energy is a pure player in that they're concentrated in two regions, the Permian and Eagle Ford shale. SM Energy does about $1.5 billion in annual revenue. 65% of that comes from oil, the rest coming from gas and natural gas liquids. Headquartered in Denver, Colorado, SM Energy has 635 employees. Now, we downgraded SM Energy from a buy in January to a hold now because of three reasons. One, we see upside in that they have superior assets in the Permian and Eagle Ford shale, but these assets have high depletion rates, leading to high DD&A cost per barrel. Two, capital efficiency is out the window for 2019. SM Energy cut their capex by 20% and also lowered their long-term production guidance into the high single digits, posing a threat to their ability to pay down debt and also remain free cash flow positive. And finally, competition. These large companies and integrated majors are turning their attention to the Permian region, and these companies seemingly have unlimited resources and cash-heavy balance sheets. Small companies like SM Energy will find it difficult to compete with these companies.
Now, the oil and gas industry is unique and that is highly dependent on macroeconomic factors. So in 2018, we saw the Great American Shale Revolution as the U.S. became the world's #1 oil producer, producing 11 million barrels per day of oil. Now, with this rapid production growth, we've seen price volatility with highs of $76 per barrel in October and lows below $50 per barrel in December. Now, the world's oil cartel, OPEC, agreed to cut production by 1.2 million barrels per day starting in January 2019 in an effort to regulate supply and prices. So, most of this growth is coming from the Permian, which grew by 42% from 2017 to 2019. Now, the Permian has an advantage in that it's a layer cake of economically producible shale zones, where each layer a company can drill down and get oil and gas. Now, in order to get access to this acreage, SM paid $42,000 per acre in 2016. Now, this is comparable to other small cap E&P players. However, it is higher than the overall Permian average of $25,000 per acre. Now, with this rapid production growth, we've seen problems such as takeaway capacity and basis differentials, or a difference between the price at wellhead and the price at the WTI oil hub. Now, SM protects against this risk by hedging at just $3 per barrel through 2019. Now, takeaway capacity is expected to be relieved in 2019 and 2020 with 5 new pipelines coming online, which will increase production from 3.6 to 6 million barrels per day.
So looking at a single well, this is one of the biggest barriers to the industry because this is how these companies make all their decisions, is their microeconomics. So SM is planning on paying about $7.7 million in initial drilling and completion costs for a single well. Given recent trends with these companies, they've been really trying to accelerate their decline curves to get as much production out of the ground as soon as possible and eliminate price risk. So SM is breaking even on the well after about a year, with everything thereafter being a dividend. So what this means in terms of returns is that at $55 a barrel and $2.50 per 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas, they have an IRR of about 46%, which is 10 to 15% higher than most of their competitors. So continuing to look at their competitors, and specifically with wells, their average well production is about 3,000 barrels higher than their competitors, but their higher acreage costs, looking at the higher depletion rates, is a problem as their EBIT margin is 14% lower. Looking at leverage, they're 0.2 times higher in terms of debt to proved reserves, and then also 30% higher in debt to equity. Finally, looking at their operational costs per barrel of oil equivalent, they're just right in line with most of their peers. So going back 5 years, what we've seen is the last time SM was profitable was 2014 when prices were high, also again in 2018 when prices came back. But since then, we've seen a massive change in strategy from the company. They've divested over 1 million acres out of areas like Montana and the Bakken and Dakotas, and only in Texas. So that's a 70% decline in acreage, but production has only fallen 20%. And then looking at our change in recommendation probably comes from one single thing, that's a change in guidance from the company. So in 2018, the company was saying that they're going to be cash flow neutral about halfway through this year, given a 15% reduction in CapEx. So this is a little concerning to us because reduction in CapEx will lead to less production starting in about 2020. And then going forward, in 2019, the company said that they were going to reduce CapEx an additional 5%, and they also changed the language they were using and shooting for. They said they were just going to shoot for free cash flow positive. We really don't think this is going to happen, just looking at their hedging position and also guidance for more leverage at 3 times net debt to EBITDAX by the end of this year. So as investors, what we're looking at now is their debt. So starting in 2022, they have almost $500 million due almost every single year. But looking at their free cash flow, they're barely going to scrape by to pay that back. So we expect them to either refinance that or cut CapEx, which is an issue because around that time they will have to go look for acquiring more reserves.
So, given this financial analysis, how do we go about valuing SM on a per share basis? So for our valuation, we utilize both a relative and intrinsic valuation model. So for a relative valuation, we utilize a comparable company analysis. And for a comparable company analysis, we chose to use more traditional valuation multiples to the upstream oil and gas industry. And due to differences in geographies and plays, we elected to give this specific model an overall 40% weighting in our weighted price target price calculation. And this model yielded a per share price of $15. So our next and arguably most important valuation model is our net asset value model. And we believe that this model gives us a pretty accurate representation of SM's current company value based on its proved reserves and undeveloped acreage. So we split this model up into 2 areas based on SM's 2 core assets, its Permian assets and its Eagle Ford shale assets, calculating the net present value of cash flows from oil, gas, and NGL revenues along with the total value of undeveloped acreage. We then developed 3 cases based on commodity prices, asset prices on a per acre basis, and hedging differentials. We then assigned each case a different weight based on our macroeconomic thesis, which yielded a per share price of $23. So given these calculations, our net asset value and our comparable company analysis gave us a blended per share price of $20 with 10% upside at the closing price of April 16th. So moving along, what are the risks associated with investing in SM? So for our risk analysis, we looked at 3 high impact, high probability risks. So our first risk is force majeure. And essentially what a force majeure is, it's a contract clause between SM and its refineries, whereby SM cannot take action against its refineries in the occasion that these refineries are not able to meet obligations with SM due to adverse weather conditions. So we saw this in the 4th quarter of 2018 and the 1st quarter of 2019, resulting in an 800,000 barrel oil equivalent loss, totaling to a $68.9 million financial loss. So our second risk is commodity price volatility. And due to the cyclicality of the oil markets, a downturn in prices could result in a negative impact on SM's revenue, the value of their acreage, and the value of their proved reserves. And third and finally, a risk is leverage. And so SM is currently levered at 2.2 times net debt to trailing 12-month EBITDAX. In the occasion that they aren't able to grow their production, this could drastically impact SM's ability to generate the cash to not only pay down the principal of their debt, but also service that debt.
In conclusion, why hold an SM Energy? 1, we see an upside because they have superior assets in the Permian and Eagle Ford shale. But these assets were expensive to acquire and also have high depletion rates. This leads to higher DD&A cost per barrel and higher LOE cost per barrel. Secondly, free cash flow positivity for 2019 is out the window, as we've seen SM cut CapEx by 20% and also lowered their production guidance into the high single digits, posing a threat to their ability to pay down their debt and also remain free cash flow positive in 2019. And finally, competition. These large oil integrated majors have economies of scale, and they turn their attention to the Permian region. What this means is that they have a cash-heavy balance sheet, and SM Energy, as a small company, will have an inability to compete with these companies because of their size. And for those reasons, we'd like to reiterate our hold rating with a target price of $20 and an upside of 10%. Thank you so much for your time.
When you were looking at your discounted cash flows and you had the base case 50% your allocation weighting on how you determine pricing, you gave more of a higher weight to the bear case because this is very commodity sensitive. Could you just explain how you determined to do it?
Yeah, so our base case is based on their hedging right now. So they're 80% for 2019 of 2019 production at around $55 a barrel. So we thought that the 50% weighting for the base case would make the most sense. We decided to give the 30% downside because they might see some ripple effect from the lower oil and gas prices experienced in December, where it hit the high 40s. So they might experience some below the 55 targets later this year as the hedging moves at about kind of a 6-month pace to when they go into the contracts.
How would you value the company as an acquisition target?
So, I mean, obviously everybody's seen a lot of these big acquisitions lately. So, I mean, Anadarko is the big one. There's more news about that today. That one's a little different because Anadarko has much more diverse assets, primarily a midstream asset, and then also a refinery in Mozambique. But so looking at SM, they don't have any of that. So it's all about the acreage. And so if you look at the map of where their acreage is and their competitors, there's no massive competitors. You know, the integrated majors close by. It's mostly all small companies next to them. But going forward, we would expect them to be a potential target given how good their acreage is, or they would have to just buy more, probably divest their Eagle Ford assets.
Yeah, so I think, to go off that, a lot of the talk around the M&A activity is about operational synergies, so how kind of close the acreage is together and whether that makes sense from an operational standpoint, because if you're going to acquire a company in the Permian Basin, but you're operating in the Delaware Basin, you're going to have a lot of transportation bottlenecks, so something like that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, a lot of questions of the troubled story. Yeah, have faith that you guys did a really good job on valuation. Seems like you're on the side of the fence that, definitely not free cash flow positive this year, and they haven't been free cash flow positive for quite some time. So I wonder if when you're running the numbers, what crude WTI would have to get to kind of tell you as an analyst where that FCF turns. That's a driver for the stock, and if you model it out to get to 80, would that work for them, given how they downsized and sold off so much acreage?
Yeah, so we ran a sensitivity analysis with our net asset value model, which took into account both prices in acreage and hedging differentials as well. So as you can see, around kind of a $65 price environment, you get kind of around $34 per share, kind of a $10 increase. But we would like to reiterate how we kind of thought about our valuation process. We looked a lot more kind of at the fundamentals rather than kind of the price environment they could potentially operate in. As you said, kind of an $80 price environment, they are hedged. I think at a cap of $64, so they won't be able to see kind of that extra upside, maybe for 20% unhedged production. But to reiterate, we did focus more on the fundamentals rather than taking solely the macro into account.
And I'd like to go off of that and say they do have very good wells. They have IP rates above 2,000 in some of their Howard County acreage. Oil percentage ranges from 88 to 91%, which is very high, but at a certain point it becomes not economically producible in a low price environment.
So they've really shrunk this thing over the last 6 or 7 years. I still see funding gaps as we're just talking about free cash flow. What remaining sort of non-core assets do they have that they can sell?
So they have some acreage that's classified as Rocky Mountain acreage. I'm not really sure what they're doing with it. Either they're not paying to get it audited for the reserves audited, or it's not really worth anything. So we're not sure what the plan there is. But based on our response from management, we asked them what they were interested with their Eagle Ford gas assets. So their response is they're not really focused on the gas. They're not bullish on that, which is surprising given the uptick in LNG facilities around the world, especially on the coast. But then going forward, I mean, look at their CapEx, 80% is in the Permian. So they're only bidding less than 30 wells in the Eagle Ford. So we really think that that in a joint venture, they're also a joint venture where they're not spending any money in the Eagle Ford. So we really think that they're less focused there. And if they need money, they're going to start divesting there and acquire more Permian acreage.
And with these gas assets, so gas has been around $2.50. We saw highs of $4 in the winter when it was very cold. However, there's a lot of associated gas that's produced with their oil wells, so that's caused a lot of gas surplus in the Permian. It increased from 70 billion cubic feet per day to 90 billion cubic feet per day was this year. So at one point, these differentials were
What would it take for you to want to find this attractive and buy? What would you like to see from management?
So the biggest thing for us is, I mean, there's a lot of pressure across the whole industry, is we want to see an organically funded company in terms of operations. And this year, SM is not that company.
Yeah, so to go off of that as well, it's a big kind of industry trend where a lot of equity investors are, demanding more returns via kind of a slowdown in CapEx and production. But overall, we do think that their debt levels are somewhat unsustainable, and they did guide for 2019 at 3 times net debt to trailing 12-month EBITDAX, and with the EBITDAX consensus being around $1 billion, that would result in them taking out another $500 million of debt this year, which results in more added risk to the company as well.
With so much debt coming due in 2022 and other years, do you see any risk of default?
We're not as worried about default. They still have a $1.5 million revolver. They're very, very hesitant to draw on that because that's secured. Nothing else is secured, so there's more covenants attached to that. But so far, they've been very successful at refinancing. They refinanced last year, and they continue to do that. So that's what we're mostly expecting.
And to go off that, kind of a major risk we didn't really discuss too much in depth is they have historically refinanced pretty much all of their maturities, but in the occasion that we do see a rise in interest rates, that might get them at the higher coupon of around 7 to 7.25%, which could be detrimental from a debt servicing perspective. So.
Any thoughts on this chatter? Looks like a firm called Carrizo. They might partner up. I think that's one way that these companies get out of debtor's prison. We'll get squeezed, so they get leverage and leverage up. You guys, any thoughts on that?
Well, with the merger with Carrizo, there aren't any potential synergies between these two companies. The potential synergy you might see is G&A, and that's really going to have a huge impact on SM Energy as a company. So it's still chatter right now, so the potential synergies are definitely very attractive.
Great, thanks.
So some of those synergies, so their acreage is about 100, 200 miles apart in the Midland Basin, and that means you have to get trucks, you have to get rigs, completion crews from one field to the other.
Can you talk a little bit about your commodity pricing assumptions, what outside sources you might have used to come up with those?
Yeah, so our commodity pricing assumptions mainly went off of their 2019 guidance of hedges around $55, and from there we just kind of discounted the prices kind of based on historical volatility and somewhat kind of reasonable prices we can see based on not only kind of their hedging, but also kind of on the macro. As we said, we have seen as opposed to yesterday with the kind of Iranian oil supply cuts with Trump ending those contracts. So that's mainly kind of what our price assumptions are based off of. We tried to keep it realistic, but also in our sensitivity case, we did kind of look at some higher kind of $80 per BOE and as low as kind of 45. So we took into account a multitude of cases.
And the macro environment's always changing, right? So we saw historic highs last year in October, which dropped to in Christmas. We saw really low lows. So with the macro environment right now, with the Iranian oil, so that's 1.3 million barrels per day. OPEC can step in with higher production because they did cut production. Russia is also